it's really easy to hide your pain.
Yeah.
It's really easy. That isn't really strength. That's the opposite of it, right? That's kind of weak, right? But for you to say, listen, when you ask me how I'm doing, I'm saying, listen, I'm not doing well. That shows strength. That shows that you have emotional intelligence. You're aware of what you're feeling, and you have the judgment and capacity to say, you know what, I need support.
Mm-hmm.
And when we feel like we have that sense of support from our loved ones, whether it's our significant other or family member, it makes it easier for us to put that Superman cape, take that Superman cape off and say, you know what, I need to get support.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Legacy Speaks. My name is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and wellness coach, and I'm here today with the wonderful Mr. Avery Rosser. He is the founder and CEO of We Climb Counseling and Consulting here in Metro Atlanta. We're just going to dive into some amazing topics, especially with regards to Black men's mental health. So without further ado, Avery, let the people know who you are and a little bit more about your practice.
Yeah, Sierra, thank you so much again for inviting me to be a part of such an amazing platform. I had such an amazing time the last time we spoke. I believe that was, I don't know how long ago that was, maybe a year or two ago, but
years ago, at the
about
beginning
2
of
years
the
ago.
pandemic, yeah.
So you didn't forget about me. So thank you so much for always thinking of me.
Yeah.
As you said, my name is Avery Rosser. I am also a licensed professional counselor, and as well as a certified professional counselor supervisor for the state of Georgia, owner and CEO and clinical director of We Climb Counseling Consulting. I run this company in parallel with my wife, who is a social worker. So it's more so of a family counseling business. Hopefully my son takes the reign at some point, but he's free to make his own decision. But yeah, so in conjunction with doing that, I am also a suicide prevention telehealth therapist with the Department of Veteran Affairs. And in that role, I serve as a evidence-based therapist, serving veterans that are considered high risk for suicide. Along with that, I wear multiple hats. So along with that, I am acting president and CEO of the Counseling Brothers of Atlanta, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization based out of here in Atlanta. And we are comprised of all Black male therapists. We own and operate our individual practices, but we come together to form a task group that aims to really eradicate and eliminate those barriers for accessing mental health services within the Black community. I am a second year PhD student at the University of Georgia, where I am studying counseling, education, and supervision. My research really aims at looking at the phenomena of moral injury and race-based trauma. So I'm looking at the intersectionality of race and trauma in a sense within actually law enforcement, Black law enforcement. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this platform.
Yes, thank you for laying out your resume. I absolutely love it. I love when people come on and they talk about all the amazing things that they're doing. The whole purpose of the Legacy Speaks podcast is to showcase Black clinicians and what we're doing out here. I often hear, where are y'all? I can't find y'all. Well, we are here and we're doing amazing things. So thank you for all that you're doing for the field, not only within the state, but on a national level as well. So let's get into it. So like we talked about, the last time we spoke was about 2 years ago, and it was during the pandemic, and we were really focusing on a lot of like anxiety and how to navigate the newness of it all. But what we've noticed is that there's been a rise in suicide rates, especially within African-American communities. As a matter of fact, 80% of the suicides that have taken place have been African-American males. And typically we see that oftentimes for us as Black women, we may be doing we may be experiencing the suicidal ideation, but most of the actual attempts are with our men. And it's caused by a lot of the firearms that are really accessible, or maybe even like trying to pretend like nothing is happening and whatnot. And so can you speak to suicide prevention within the Black community, how can we as a people highlight it, but also address it at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great question. And you're absolutely right. There is such a rise in the number of Black men that are attempting suicide and or completing suicide. There's always been an issue in suicide and suicide prevention within the African American community. I think in this present day and age, there's more of a spotlight on it. It's one of those things where historically, if you want to talk, kind of like the originalities of it, historically, Black men, we don't talk about the things that are troubling us. Predating back to slavery, civil rights, and things of that nature, like there's been a stigma that has been placed on Black men that says that we always have to be strong. We cannot show weakness, and showing signs of that you're struggling is also saying that you're weak as well. I think what is happening now is that with everything that's going on in the height of we're still in this pandemic, but we're also in this pandemic of social unrest, right? Where you're seeing a lot of Black men being traumatized by the civil unrest or police brutality. And even if you're not directly impacted by it, like you're not directly involved in that encounter, that vicarious trauma is real because you can identify with the other Black man that's on the side of that camera, right? Or on the side of that barrel. And so there's been a rise in this sense of feeling hopeless. There's been a rise in this sense of just intense fear and anxiety and depression. And with this rise, we're still not seeing the numbers go to where we want to go in the sense of Black men seeking support. So you have this increase in traumatic responses, but there's a lack of care. All right. So a lot of those factors alone are contributing to that influx of suicide attempts and suicide deaths within the Black communities, more specifically within Black males.
Thank you so much for all of that. And I do want to highlight a couple of terminologies for anybody who's listening to this particular episode. There is a difference between an actual attempt and completion. And we have strayed away from that typical language of committed suicide. The reason why we don't utilize committed suicide is because the word commit makes suicide look like a crime. It makes it seem like the person is selfish and whatnot. And so we say death by suicide or the cause of death is suicide. We change the language to not necessarily pacify it or sugarcoat it, but to not address it as a criminal offense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad that you spoke on that as well.
Yeah, obviously, because I think a lot of people, they're still seeing mental health from the archaic perspective. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at the diagnosis as a label, or they're looking at certain mental health concerns as a person's personality. And so I do want to challenge all of those stigmas in relation to that, because mental health concerns are not a personality defect. There's a lot that comes into play. Like even when we're talking about the concept of trauma, trauma is not something that is trendy or a trigger. Is how they used to, people like to use those types of words to just slap on any and everything. But no, healing is specific. There are certain things that are designated for the healing journey. And so we as clinicians, we have to educate the people on that.
Absolutely. I think that's a part. I think that's the first step when we're talking about eradicating those stigmas and barriers, right? Eliminate those barriers, is that we have to understand how important language is. And often language is one of those things that, how we say things and how we coin things really influences our beliefs as it relates to us seeking support. Again, over the years, we've heard the term committed suicide, and that mental health is for crazy people and things of that nature. And that language matters. So that first part of really advocating and really eliminating those barriers is to educate the community about what language is best to use versus what's not.
Definitely. And as a new clinician, for a long time, I worked in the substance abuse space, and the majority of my caseload were African American men, especially individuals who have matriculated through prisons, jails, or maybe even homelessness. And what I find is they're dealing with a lot of things. So, like the inability to provide not only for themselves, but their family as well, that guilt and that shame, maybe even dealing with gender identity or sexuality identity because of like male sexual trauma, all of the things that we have a tendency of overlooking. And I love being a part of their journey because it literally looks like their first time being able to put their bags down.
Absolutely.
And so how can not only just Black women, but like their loved ones and friends and whatnot rally around Black men to help support their journey for anybody who is starting, growing, or strengthening their journey as an African American male?
I love that question. You know, we don't ask that question enough. We're human just like everybody else. I think that's the first thing, is seeing that man as another human being instead of a superhero. I often have this conversation with my wife being a therapist. She also understands this, is that as a man and as a Black man, there's such a level of responsibilities, and also for women as well. But speaking specifically to that Black male experience, is that there's a level of responsibility that not only you put on yourself, but society puts on you.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that weight becomes so insurmountable to where you feel like giving up, right? So one of the things I think is important, one of the key things I think is important to do as far as supporting Black men in this journey, is to let them know that their feelings and their concerns matter. That when they come to you and they're talking about their experiences, when they're talking about their feelings, that they don't feel demasculated by saying, "Look, I'm not feeling it. Like I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling anxious." What we would typically hear, and I know in my generation and in my household growing up, it was, be a man. What does that look like? Right? What exactly does that look like? Does that look like I don't supposed to have feelings? Right? So being able to say, listen, I see you just as another human being, and I care about you, and I want to support you, and your experiences matter just like it matters to the next person. So really just validating them and really just rallying around and let them know, like, hey, being vulnerable doesn't mean that you're strong, right? Mm-hmm. If you're able to recognize, right, have that sense of awareness and then that judgment to seek support, that is the ultimate sign of strength. It's really easy to hide your pain. Yeah. It's really easy. That isn't really strength. That's the opposite of it, right? That's kind of weak, right? But for you to say, listen, when you ask me how I'm doing, I'm saying, listen, I'm not doing well. That shows strength. That shows that you have emotional intelligence. You're aware of what you're feeling, and you have the judgment and capacity to say, you know what, I need support. Mm-hmm. And when we feel like we have that sense of support from our loved ones, whether it's our significant other or family member, it makes it easier for us to put that Superman cape, take that Superman cape off and say, you know what, I need to get support. Right. So that's one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah. That relentless honesty is so important because it gets rid of a lot of barriers and boundaries that a lot of individuals try to uphold in order to have some type of image, right? Mm-hmm. So like you mentioned, it really just depends on the type of language that you've utilized, or maybe even like the labels that you've put on yourself growing up. Like you mentioned, like, be a man, don't cry, don't show any emotion, or the concept of maybe even fatherhood, like, okay, you need to be having all these types of women.
All these things. Yeah.
These things. And so like learning to redefine what masculinity or even other larger concepts like fatherhood or love and relationships, redefining those things for yourself. And even as you're talking about the concept of fatherhood, you're a father, you're a husband. Mm-hmm. And what does generational healing mean to you? especially as you are working on your own personal healing journey. One thing that I always remind people is that when you do the inner work, it's not something that's an isolated situation. It's just like a lot of people are focusing on generational wealth. You can pass on language of healing. You could pass on actions and behavioral habits of healing. And so what does that look like for you, and how do you help your clients or your male clients recreate that for themselves?
Vulnerability, allowing yourself to be vulnerable in every space and being able to show up in your authentic form. I think for me, getting personal, this is the first time I've ever shared this on a large platform. People close to me know this, but when I was 8, I was sexually molested by an adult male cousin. And that caused a lot of toxic masculine behavior for me, of a feeling the need to kind of like prove my masculinity. And it created a cycle that I knew that was good, that was unhealthy. As I got older, I was like, okay, this isn't healthy, right? This is really negatively impacting my ability to engage in healthy relationships, right? I never saw what that looked like because of things that have happened, generational things that happen within my family dynamic, and of course my own trauma. So what does it look like for me is allowing my 13-year-old son to see me go through therapy, right? I talk about, when he asks me, hey, how are you doing? I don't hide how I'm feeling for him, right? This whole notion that a child needs to stay in a child place and you don't supposed to put things on. I agree with that to an extent, but what I want to do is say, I tell my son, listen, if I'm gonna tell you that, hey, it's ask for help, I want you to see that your dad is also asking for help, right? And when he asks me genuinely how I'm doing, I would tell him, hey, I've had a rough day. When I'm really struggling in this past year, this past November, December, I was in one of the hardest places of my life outside of losing my parents, where I experienced anxiety and depression. And I had to, go to see a psychiatrist, and more so my primary care for medication. But I really had to lock in with my therapist, right? And I was genuine with my son about what it is that I was experiencing, right? By being transparent with him, it allowed him to see like, hey, even though dad is also human.
Yeah.
Right? Dad is also human. And dad isn't saying that he's too strong or too masculine to ask for help. Right? He asked me, hey, how was your therapy session? Oh, it was good. Or it was tough. Like my therapist challenged me on a lot of different things. Right? So I'm having these conversations with my son about these things that are happening, right? About my mental health, because I want to encourage him to say, hey, if something is going on with you, I want to encourage you to also seek support. And that to me is breaking that generational curse, or that generational trauma that were passed down to me by my dad and my mom, right? So it's allowing him to see like, hey, you talking about your mental health is the most courageous thing that you can do. So just really opening that conversation up and saying like, listen, dad struggles too.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not exempt from it, for not at all. I say, hey, I need a hug. Right. Do you need a hug?
Yeah.
Right. Just because you're a man, I'm not gonna, I try my best not to treat my son and my daughter different as far as how I respond to them. Right. Listen, I'm big on embracing my son with love. I'm big on saying, yo, I love you. I'm big on checking in with you, how you're doing. That to me is breaking generational curse. My wife brought up a good question. We were traveling back from Virginia, and she asked me, and I had never been asked this question, never had to think about this. And she was like, how are you shown love when you were growing up, when you were growing up? And I was like, man, no one ever asked me that. I never had to think about that. And I think for me, it was more so acts of service, right? I wasn't told I love you a lot. It was my mom just made sure she did X, Y, and Z for me. And that was a way of showing love, right? So then that makes me think about, how am I showing love to my kids, right? When they get older and they reflect back on how are they showing love, how will I be able to say, hey, this is what I did to show them love? right? So I make sure that I tell my son, I love you. I make sure that I say, yo, give me a hug, right? I make sure that I'm engaging those acts of service and things of that nature. And that for me is really breaking those generational curses that have been passed down to us for generations and generations.
Yes. Oh, Avery, that is so good. And shout out to your wife for
Yeah,
asking that
he's
question.
dope.
Isn't
He's
it
dope.
so cool to be married to another therapist? It's just
It
like,
is. Yeah, conversations get deep sometimes.
right, exactly. Oh my goodness. So I'm hearing you're giving the gift of self-awareness. You're also giving the gift of honesty as well, like putting things out in the open and
Mhm.
allowing him to be able to, I guess, normalize what it
Absolutely.
looks like to heal collectively,
Hmm.
so to speak. I think that's
Hmm.
so beautiful. And like even when you're talking about the conversations and whatnot, I don't think you know this, but a lot of my listeners know this. The reason why I'm in the field today is because of my father. So when I moved to Atlanta, my father was experiencing suicidal and homicidal ideations. We were growing up, he had like huge levels of depression. But back then, we didn't know what that was. You know, we
Right.
just thought that he was just angry and frustrated, but we knew that he loved us and
Hmm.
showcased his love towards us. It's just whatever anger that he had, he would just exhibit it in other ways, or binge eating or watching TV and things of that nature, loss of interest in the things we once enjoyed. You can go down the entire list.
Hmm.
Um, but once we figured out that it was depression, that's when I transitioned into the mental health field from the entertainment industry, because I was trying to figure out how can we take this information and make it a norm for us? How can we get out of the rat race of living from paycheck to paycheck and
Hmm.
challenge all of those stigmas that are associated with us, the strong Black woman syndrome or Superman syndrome, and all of those things that society has placed on us, or the ways that we cope maladaptively with the systemic pressures that we experience as a people. And so, like you mentioned, it's so important now that you have the information, learning to pivot and change. Ever since my father, because you know in Florida they have Baker Act and we have 1013 here, and ever since he was Baker acted, even though he doesn't see a therapist right now, the thing that sticks out to him the most is that group therapy component.
Hmm.
Sitting there listening to other people's stories and recognizing that, yo, I have a lot to be thankful for in this very moment. And ever since then, it created opportunities for healing conversations, getting to know why are you the way that you are, like what led to this point, things of that nature. And for me, you know, for us, we have like genograms and whatnot. We have
Hmm.
clients go through that. For anybody who doesn't know what a genogram is, you're literally taking your family tree and you're looking at specific behaviors. So, like, for example, if divorce runs in your family, you see that. If suicide's running your family, you see that, blase squaze. And so you're literally taking the time to see, okay, what led to who you are today, what experiences, what traumatic events,
Hmm.
like your villain origin story, so to
Hmm.
speak. And it's very beautiful to see
It
that.
is.
And
It really is.
the things that you're doing with your family as a collective, I think that's beautiful as well, because you're writing that new chapter for the next generation and the next generation. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And trusting me to hear that story and trusting all of us to hear that story. So thank you for sharing that story. And shout out to your pops for doing the work, man.
yeah, thank you. Of course.
Mm.
I always get tickled. It's like, thank you for trusting me. I'm like, of course, you know, we've heard worse things as clinicians, but yes, obviously, thank you. Yeah, so you have a amazing course that is coming out called Soul Cry, and it's multiple sessions, and the first one is coming up July the 9th. Can you let the people know a little bit more about Soul Cry and the work that you're doing with regards to moral injury? And for anybody who doesn't even know what moral injury is, can you go into detail about that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Soul Cry. Soul Cry is essentially the title is Soul Cry, addressing moral injury with military populations in private practice. So it is a continuing education course for clinicians If you are not a clinician, but you also like to participate and kind of learn more about this construct of moral injury, then by all means sign up. I would love to have you. I would love to share what I'm passionate about. But moral injury is a construct that is relatively new, as far as the construct and the term, relatively new to the field of mental health. It is something that it's been around, but moral injury, in a sense, is this: when your moral compass, when there's acts, when you engage in acts that really transgress or go against your moral compass, right? And it leads to psychological damages, right? Mm-hmm. So for an example, in the context of the military population, is you had to, one of my examples would be I had a veteran that was a sniper, and he had to shoot a kid. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, he felt like I was just doing my job, and it didn't really bother him, right? It was us against them. But when things kind of slowed down for him, he had to sit there and think about it. There was a wrestle. He wrestled greatly against like his morals, which was to take a kid's life was wrong. Yeah. Right. Although this was my job, now I had to sit with this fact of like, that was also a kid. Yeah. So your moral compass has been kind of shaken. That foundation has been shaken, and it causes you to experience this psychological distress, similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a correlation between post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury. There's correlation, but there's also some differences as well. Moral injury, you're looking more so at the main symptoms being shame, guilt, alienation, also depression, suicidal ideation. But that big difference is that sense of like feeling like I'm not a good person. I'm ashamed of who I am. I'm guilty for the act that I'm engaging in, right? Mm. So it looks quite different from post-traumatic stress disorder, but there is some overlapping symptoms. Suicidal ideation, difficulty sleeping, increased alcohol consumption, things of that nature. So I'm looking at, because it's such a new phenomenon, it isn't really recognized even within the DOD yet, yeah. Right? They're really now starting to really look at this construct. And the research is relatively new within the last 15 to 20 years, yeah. When post-traumatic stress has been researched since the 80s, even before then, but the term kind of came about in the 80s. But moral injury has been something that's been around, and even us as civilians may also experience that moral injurious behaviors and symptoms of moral injuries if we've done things, in our younger days, that when we look back, like, dang, like I don't like who I am right now because of what I did then. Mm-hmm. So you get to learn more about this construct of moral injury as it relates to the military population, and how you in private practice, if you're a clinician, how you can support veterans or active duty service member or reservists when they come see you in your office. And if you're not a clinician, you also get to learn this construct of how you can support even your loved one that may be a veteran or military personnel, or even yourself. I've had people that when I did the training before, they weren't in the field. They just kind of wanted to know what it was, because again, it looks different from, it's not post-traumatic stress disorder. You don't necessarily meet that DSM criteria, but you know it's something. And in most cases, it's that moral injury. That's what's happening.
I absolutely love the fact that you're highlighting that, because I know when I've worked with veterans previously before, immediately they hate the term post-traumatic stress disorder. One, they don't like being labeled, and then also too, they don't like the fragilization that comes with the mm-hmm. term PTSD. And so it's widening the scope, because obviously there are certain criteria that needs to be met in order to qualify for PTSD. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side too, I got to immediately thinking about how moral injury looks like for the present day father, the one who is working long hours at night, but really wants to be home with his family, or the father who has to go across country to be able to work just to put food on the table for their kids. And so can you talk about what that looks like, especially for the African-American male, and having to deal with moral injury in various forms?
Yeah. So really elaborate more on that definition is acts, if you participate, fail to witness or if you witness, fail to prevent or participate in act that transgress against your own moral values, right? Your own values, right? So how does that look in the context of Black men, right? And you use that example of working tirelessly, day in and day out. Even myself, right? My daughter, 3 years old, and she's like, "Daddy, you're at work," right? And it's like, oh man, like, you know, you're grinding, you're working, and you feel like this need to kind of like, you know, I have to support, I have to be strong, I have to take care of my family. But at the same time, there are things that you're kind of like, you're missing out on, right? And you know, deep down that morally, that being present doesn't always means the financial aspect of things.
Yeah.
But if you're in a situation where you feel like I have to make sure that I am financially taking care of the things that are going on in the household and things of that nature, it can lead to that sense of feeling shame, feeling guilty of not really being there. And you start to see that depression, you start to see that anxiety. And in some cases, you start to see that suicidal ideations. So there are some correlations. There definitely are some correlations with it, right? Moral injury, you won't see moral injury in the DSM. And for those that are not familiar with that acronym, that's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, 5th edition. They just came out with another one, a revision. So there's new stuff to learn, but that is kind of like that little blue book that teaches clinicians, hey, this is maybe what's going on with this person. But moral injury isn't in there. You see post-traumatic stress, but you don't see moral injury. And hopefully through advocacy and more work and more scholarly research that we can begin to shed more light on it. But there definitely is a correlation with just as being a Black man, and whether you're witnessing or taking part in or failing to prevent some act that transgress against your moral compass. Whether that's you know, in college and you witness, you know, some egregious act, whether it was sexual assault or something of that nature, and you didn't step up and say something, you know, that those types of things right there can cause symptoms of moral injuries.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for going a little bit more in depth into that. And so for anybody who is looking to learn more, whether you're a clinician and you're wanting to gain the information in order to better serve your clients, or you're a lay person and you're wanting to gain a better understanding of how to serve the people that you love or within your community, please make sure that you are tapping in with Avery. And speaking of which, another way to combat moral injury is connecting in community. And you are all about community with the Counseling Brothers of Atlanta. Anytime somebody is looking for a Black male clinician, I'm like, oh, my big brother's over here. Go to like CBO, ATL right here. Boom, there you go. Because y'all have been super supportive of my journey as a clinician. So I always refer people to you guys. And it's a handy dandy network of individuals who are so skilled at what they do. So can you tell the people a little bit more about Counseling Brothers of Atlanta?
Listen, I can talk all day. As you see, as a president, you know, I'm always going to rep because I got to get this more visibility, right? Yeah. We are truly an organization like none other. When I say there isn't a network or an organization like this, you won't find it anywhere other than here in Atlanta, right? We are a collective group of Black male clinicians that own and operate our own practice, right? But we have come together because we're like-minded and we have similar attainments. We have, you know, similar things that we're wanting to accomplish, right? And the overarching thing that we want to accomplish is we want to really eliminate that access. We want to bridge that access gap to Black therapists, to cultural competent therapists, right? To access to treatment are the main things that we really want to do. We want to help develop more Black male that are entering this field of mental health. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was started by 4 Black males that came together and got together on one Saturday of the month and just broke bread and talked about their journey as clinicians. And I was so fortunate to be invited into this exclusive circle. And during that time, I said, "Okay, I'm a visionary, right? I'm a big idea type person.
Yeah.
I don't always know the ins and outs of how to make things work, but I'm a visionary." And during this meeting, I was like, "Hey guys, I think that this can be something big. Like this can be something big," because we started to add more Black males to the group. And it was more us just meeting up, having lunch, one Saturday out of the month, talking about our journey as Black male therapists, doing some consultation, things of that nature, right? Supervision, things, mentoring, all of that good stuff. And I was like, you know what? I think this can be an entire organization. Like we can make this big. This can be something like global. And it was like, "Avery, what's your idea?" And I got to thinking, I was like, "All right, boom, here's what I'm thinking, right? Let's getting into college, getting into this PhD. I'm like, all right, let me go into the literature and see what are the gaps, right? I feel like I know what the gaps are. Let's see what the gaps are." And I was like, all right, here are the areas that I think we can focus on. And everybody was down. We're like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." There's always an issue with people saying you can't find Black male therapists. What if we create a directory like Psychology Today or Therapy for Black Girls? How about we create a directory so it's a one-stop shop? If you need to find a Black therapist, boom, go to thecboa.org. It has the whole directory. It's 25 of us. Pick one, right? Pick one. We're here. Some in person, virtual. We're all around. We're here in Atlanta. Another issue was, hey man, like there aren't enough culturally responsive therapists, right? We have Black men are starting to kind of go to therapy a little bit more now. So we need to make sure that they feel connected, right? That they can identify with someone. So, hey, let's make sure that we can provide these sorts of training to the community and opportunities for Black men to feel like, hey, you can come to therapy. Let's make going to therapy cool, right? So we wanted to do that as well. So we have a directory. The other issue was, hey, we need more of us. We need more. When you look at the demographic makeup of mental health professionals, right? And the field of mental health, less than 2% look like us.
Mm-hmm.
That's just Black. Not gender.
Yes.
I'm just talking about Black.
Yes.
Now, if you want to get more into like gender, it's less than 1% that are male.
Y'all are unicorns, okay? Listen.
Right? So for you to see all of these Black males and it's one location to say we are therapists, oh my God, that's a game changer. And we've heard this from time and time again when we had our member celebration downtown Atlanta at the Hard Rock Cafe, and so many people came up to you. Who are you guys? Like, what do you guys do? Right? And we're like, oh yeah, we're all clinicians. Like, all of y'all?
Yeah.
And it was like, you would have thought they seen the Globetrotter or freaking Golden State Warriors, right? That's how we felt. Right? It was like, yo, like we're here. We want people to know that, yo, we're here. We're here to serve you. We're here to support you. So that's really who we are, man. We're passionate about what we do. If you're needing a therapist, you want to check out our website, you visit www.thecboa.org. All right, so that's our website. We are a 501c3 organization, and nonprofits, you can't run without funding. There's so many different things that we want to do for the community, but we need your support. And one way you give to support us for you to donate. Tax deductible, so you'll receive that tax deductible receipt that you can file with your taxes at the end of the year or quarterly, however else you file your taxes. But we need your support, whether it's you reposting our stuff, you're attending our events, or you making a donation, a financial donation. But your support is definitely needed.
Yes, and you guys will also receive a link in the description box below, as well as in the show notes. So please definitely tap in. When I say they get active, they get active. They're in the park, they're coloring, they're doing these Instagram lives, free information by, like I mentioned, clinicians that are so well versed and so well educated in what they do. Like I mentioned, they really are the big homies, and I greatly appreciate them. Jared Washington, Dr. Alvin Sutherland, Dr. Vaughn Gay, all of them, Cody Motivation, all of y'all have always had my back with Legacy Speak, so I greatly appreciate y'all.
Yeah, we believe that it takes a village, and we're in this together. We are the 2%, right? We got to be in this thing together. We got to change the landscape of what seeking support looks like for our community. So in any way that we can be of support to, any clinician out there, if you're needing that sense of support and accountability, mentorship, like we're those people. If you are a student, Black male, and you're thinking about going into the field of mental health, or if you're already, in school for mental health, getting your master's, reach out to us. We have a mentoring program, and we're very intentional about pairing you with mentors. We're all going to be your mentors, but you'll receive a specific mentor that's really going to pour into you, and make sure that your counseling identity and your just individual identity is developed along this journey. So we look forward to supporting the community.
Absolutely. And with that being said, Avery, one question that I always ask each and every one of my guests, as you may know, the podcast is called the Legacy Speaks Podcast. And so when you look back at your own personal journey, what would you like your legacy to speak about you?
Honestly, I'm here for the people. I love my people. Honestly, like in everything that I do, friendship is big for me. Mentorship has been big for me. Without people, without my village, without the community, I legit would not be here today. Like I wouldn't be on this platform if it wasn't for the people. So for me, it's like I want my legacy to be about me serving the community.
Awesome. And so y'all make sure that you're tapping in with all things Avery Rosser, as well as We Climb Counseling and Consulting with his amazing wife as well. Make sure you're tapping in, and please let the people know where they can find you once again, not only on social media, but their website too.
Yeah, so my website, if you're interested in booking with myself or my wife, she is a phenomenal therapist. She's a social worker. And she specializes a lot within anxiety, teens and young adults experiencing anxiety, depression, but more specifically, she's tapped into the prenatal realm of mental health, postpartum depression and things of that nature. But we're at www.weclimbcc.com. So you can book with myself or my wife. My appointments are more limited right now because I am a full-time PhD student taking 3 classes this semester, which is a lot in 6 weeks. So I have limited availability, but if you email me, I'll do my best to make sure I can get you in within a reasonable time. If I can't, then I'm going to make sure that I refer you to someone that is competent and has the openings for you. On social media, I am at #counselor, 4life. You can also follow our business IG page at We Climb CC. And if you're looking to follow us at the Counseling Brothers, which I hope you do, help us get our followers up, it is the CBOATL. All right, at the CBOATL. So we look forward to working with you, hearing from you, any way that we can support you. If you need us to come speak at any of your events, things of that nature, send us an email and we get back to you within 24 hours.
Yes, and y'all, I'm a fan of sliding in the DM. So if you don't tap in via email, please make sure that you're sliding in the DM. Send a quick message to connect. It's social media for a reason, not just to post, but to connect as well. So Avery, once again, thank you so much for being a part of this particular episode. Thank you guys for tapping in. My name is Sierra Hillsman, licensed professional counselor and wellness coach. You can follow me at Legacy SPKS on everything. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And if you loved anything about this particular episode, please make sure that you leave a review and let us know what you learned from it. All right, y'all, until next time. Bye.